like the world was starting to really pay attention to the show. And Mickey and Konrad, I want to start with you and then also hear from the cast about what that experience was like and what you think contributed to the growing attention on the show this season.
I think a number of things really. I mean, the confluence of circumstances, the fact that, I mean, the show evolved between seasons and I think became a little bit more universal, a little bit more accessible. You know, the season one was a reflection of what me and Konrad wanted to write, which was sort of like slice of life show under the guise of a work-based drama in a very specific place, with very specific language. And as me and Konrad grew as writers, the scope and canvas of which we wanted to paint on became broader. So by the time we got to season 3, we were, you know, chucking in financial thriller elements, genre elements, stuff that we really were excited by. And I think just quite honestly, the show was always anchored by incredible performances, but me and Konrad really understood the speed of the show in the 3rd season. And then that coupled with the fact that we moved to Sunday nights and the fact there's nothing else on probably helped.
The core lists, the ratings were great. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, for me, from the moment I read this script, when the audition came through, I remember I flew through the first 2 episodes, I think maybe they sent, and I said, I can't wait to watch this. Like, even if I'm not in it, this is one of the best things I've ever read. And that was when it was still so niche. So having been so in love with this show for almost coming on 6 years now, having other people fall in love with it in the way that I feel like I've been in love with it for so long has been such a blessing. Being able to share it far and wide, and I think we had when we did the season 3 premiere, it was the first time that all of us had literally stood in the same room at the same. Well, most of us, Harry was not with us, which was depressing. But it was the first time that we all got to celebrate the accumulation of this big thing that we have been so passionate about and worked so hard on for so long. And to have other people like you all staring back at us and saying, we're with you, has been a huge privilege. And I think we've all grown so much. So many of us, this was our first big project, and it meant the world, and it ended up changing our lives. So to celebrate it in this way, to the scope that we have, it's just been really cool and validating and special.
Mickey and Konrad, how has your creative vision for the show expanded and maybe even changed since season 1?
Mickey touched on the way we sort of approached the first season. I mean, we were really, if any elements of it were autobiographical, there were definitely parts of our experience in it. I think we just felt, in terms of the macro picture of writing about stuff, it started very micro, the show. It was about, when we first sold the show to HBO, we want this to be an experiential thing about what it feels like to be on a trading floor. So we were even writing stuff like, the anxiety of getting someone's lunch could feel like a sort of totemic event in your life. And when we were selling the show to HBO, we actually wrote in the pitch document the worst thing you can ever write in a pitch documentary, there's no Big Bang Theory of dramatics, and it is glacially slow. And then we were surprised it took them 3 years to pick us up. But what happened was, I guess what's interesting is in the first season of the show, I mean, we thought the show had a bit of an identity crisis. We were trying to figure out quite what it was, and then putting Nathan's music over it and having a quite fast editing style made us think, oh, this is actually a really kinetic TV show. And by season 3, the New Yorker was saying, oh, this is TV for the TikTok generation. It's with people, people with really limited attention spans. But there's something about that energy which, I don't know, just carried the momentum. And to be honest with you, we couldn't believe how much story 60 minutes of TV could bear. And we just wanted to make sure that episode to episode, hour to hour, it was the most engaging thing we could possibly make. But then we became braver in our choices about what we were writing about as well. We felt like we could not only write about finance, but we wanted to write about the intersection of finance and politics and media, and make it feel, lived in and real, but also super entertaining.
I'm glad you mentioned a little bit about the pacing, because I do want to dive into the specifics of this episode and this season, but from the first episode, it just builds and builds and builds really relentlessly to these final 2 episodes. How did you approach that from a technical pacing standpoint to, as you said, fit so much into each 60 minutes or 8 episodes?
I think it was a correction from the previous season, especially the first season, which was not glacially slow, obviously, but it was a lot of the atmosphere, a lot of scene setting, great characterization, I think, amazing acting, but it was not a plot-heavy show at all. And we had to prove to ourselves in the second and third seasons that we could be a plot-heavy show. And in the first season, some of the episodes were 45 minutes long. By the time we got to season 3, we have, as Konrad said, 58-minute to 74-minute episodes, and we were like, how much stuff can we actually get in there? And also it's a function of it's something that actually I think there are certain parts of writing and filmmaking I think are sort of like post-intellectual. I think dialogue is that, but there are things that you can craft and get better at, and story I think is one of them. And I love doing story, and Konrad does as well. It's just something that we really learn to enjoy, and that's why we just cram as much as we possibly can in. And the best compliment we've ever had for the show is that it's a show you have to put your phone down for. And it's a show which leaves your jaw on the floor, and you never know what's going to happen next. And I think that's kind of rare in TV these days, sometimes, so that's the biggest compliment we can get.
I was shocked, to say the least, watching the finale for the first time in a lot of ways. I want to hear from the cast about your reactions to reading the finale for the first time. Sagar, I think I want to start with you.
Well, I don't know, spoil it, but Mickey and Konrad told me before I read it what was going to happen, which I think the great thing about that scene is that it's not in tone with the show at all, so therefore the shock factor is sort of tenfold. But yeah, it wasn't anything that I anticipated was going to happen. After what we saw in episode 4, there had to be consequences to Rishi's actions. And I think initially, I imagine audiences probably thought it was going to be to Rishi, but what better way to punish him than for it to be the person who's closest to him? So, yeah, by the reaction, it sounds like it, was quite an impact, which was the idea.
Someone told us that we're one of the TV shows that's one of the few TV shows ever to successfully jump the shark. I feel like maybe that was one of those moments, potentially.
Sagar, do you think that is Rishi gonna crash out more after this, or is he gonna finally get his act together? Like, what do you think is next for this character?
I think that's a question above my pay grade. Should be asking those gentlemen down the end. I don't know. Truthfully, I think, it could go so many ways. It could be he completely crashes out, or he goes the complete opposite and fixes up and is, unrecognizable and just nice and polite and sweet. You never know. But I think the good thing about the way it ended is that the options are open, and again, the gentleman, the esteemed gentleman down the end of the road, I'm sure will come up with something that everyone will like.
Mickey was wagging his finger. I feel like crash out is the answer here.
I think it's not our instinct as writers is just I don't know. There was one. I remember in season 2 when we were coming up the ending of season 2, when we had a great executive at HBO who said, we wrote this quite like it was a nice ending. It was an ending where Robert actually stood up for someone, and HBO said, I feel like I'm reading a sort of like op-ed. Like, this is not the show. Like, and then we returned and gave him the ending where he's in the car with Nicole, being asked to go onto the motorway or come back into her bosom, and they were like, oh, yeah, that's the show. So I feel like, my instinct as a nice person obviously is to give Rishi a nice ending, but my instinct as a writer of industry is to give Rishi a slightly less nice ending.
Ken, I want to hear from you. In the finale, Eric is the one to rally Pierpoint only for them to leave him in the dust. And I'm curious how you made sense of this character this season and this arc, and what you think that those final moments do to him after how committed he's been to Pierpoint.
I think it makes sense to him, what happened. Just the math of how this business works kind of logically leads him to how he ends up. As far as what's going on at the end, you know, when we reach a place where kind of what we've built up has been torn away and we lose our armor and our cover, our show, the curtains are pulled down. We have this opportunity, right? Are we going to look at what we see when the curtains are torn down? Or are we going to look for further distractions to avoid looking at things that we need to look at? So he has this great opportunity. How he, you know, deals with that is up to these guys. But I think that's where he's at the end.
Marisa, this is a really difficult season for Yasmin in a lot of ways. And I want to ask you how you thought about her motivations for choosing Henry in the finale and kind of everything that unfolds with her and Rob leading up to that moment and how you made sense of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, we talked before about the kind of like evolution of series 1 to now, and I guess the privilege of being part of a TV show with 3 seasons is that you live with this person for that long. I think if you'd have met Yasmin in season 3, she would have made no sense to anyone, and I don't think I'd have made the same acting choices as I did in season 3. Like even, you know, with the exact same script, she would have felt like a much harder person. But the brilliance of being able to play Yasmin is that because we know her as that girl from season 1, that the inner is still this kind of incredibly vulnerable child that like wants to be safe and wants to be respected and acknowledged by the people around her. It makes sense of her decisions to me, you know, being with someone like Henry. There is safety there. She has no family now. She has no friends, really. And if her options are living within these walls with Henry and being financially secure, safe, having a family that's going to look after her in the public eye, which, whether she likes it or not, she's in there now, is just a much safer bet than Robert. You know, who is a lovely man and like they have a great relationship, but like it could be he's a boyfriend, you know, and but he is. Who knows? They could break up in 2 years, you know, like they have a relationship, whereas Henry is giving her a ring and is like, you can be lady of this manor. Come on. But thank you. But I think that mostly it's about, the amazing thing is, I guess it's kind of the opposite of what Ken is talking about, and it's I think the brilliance of the writers is that the characters are going through this thing at different times. I think we're watching Yasmin in season 3 build up armor, like she was naked in season 1, and in season 3 she is completely like, she is a knight in armor, like going into battle, and like that's why I'm excited for season 4, is that I think that we're going to see the hardest version of her, and I think that you know, the only people that know Yasmin left, the real Yasmin, are the audience now, and that's just a really exciting place to be.
I think it's interesting to watch that juxtaposed against Rob becoming much more vulnerable in this season and kind of stripping his armor away as the person that he so desperately wants to be with is doing the exact opposite. Harry, I'm curious how you made sense of Rob's, vulnerability this season and his decision to not maybe race to the top anymore and be okay with where he is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more evident in this season. It's more kind of extroverted, I suppose, that vulnerability. But for me, it's always been there, really. It's always been the lens with which I've kind of identified the character with. And right from our first conversations, even in the audition process, I think back in season 1, when I first auditioned, I only got to read about 4 episodes, I think. And I came in with a very specific model idea of how I'd interpreted that character, and it wasn't particularly sympathetic. He seemed like a bit of a douche, really. And I played him kind of appropriately, and I remember the guy saying to me early doors, "Nah, he's a nice guy, he's a nice guy." And I was like, where is the evidence for that? Because he was just, you know, a bit of a jack-o'-lad and kind of charismatic and friendly to an extent, but sort of gregarious and unpredictable. But through conversations with the boys and like Marisa said, you know, one of the great privileges of long-running television and having the opportunity to be a part of that is there's a kind of a synergy and a kind of intersectionality that happens between you and your character. You gradually merge closer and the lines become blurred, and I think we've all experienced that to some extent. And yeah, once I understood the assignment in that sense, it was always my aim for season 1. In every scene I had this kind of inner objective to be like, how can I make his heart visible in this scene, in any scene, every scene, if possible. And it just became less difficult to do by the end. And yeah, I suppose in season 3, he's having a full-on meltdown. And I suppose the infrastructure and the ecosystem that he's in is kind of bullying him, and he realizes that he's not made for this world, and has to kind of realign his values appropriately, I suppose. Yeah.
I asked Mickey and Konrad so many times over the course of the season, like, how much more can Rob take before he crashes out appropriately? And I'm curious of what you think, you know, going into a season 4 of like, what is Rob, how is he going to just respond to the world after everything that's happened to him in season 3?
Yeah, I asked myself the same question during season 3. It felt, I remember at one point I said to the guys, it feels like at the end of every scene, it just cuts to my face with some sort of like pathetic, like sad boy puppy expression. It's really exposing my kind of like, my one card as an actor. Like, that's my niche, you know. It's my go-to. So yeah, if anything, it really kind of highlighted my limitations, really. But yeah, I don't know. I think that the ending of season 3 was really meaningful for me because it's an example of, I suppose, Robert seizing some kind of autonomy and recognizing there is a world in where you can have your cake and eat it, I suppose. He's not entirely renouncing capitalism, but he's searching for a way in which he can kind of cooperate with it on his own terms and find a way of working that is bespoke to him and actually lends itself to what he's good at, what he was always good at, if there is anything. I think many people have questioned why he's even ended, how he's even ended up here. But yeah, I think there was a certain kind of messiness and charm to the Robert that we first met. That was his USP, and I think season 3 eventually turns out to be a kind of a recentering to that, and a rebirth to some extent.
Myha'la and Marisa, we have to talk about the slap in episode 6. First, I want to know about just filming that scene. It's a brilliant scene, and it's, you know, just the gloves are really off in a way that those characters have never interacted with each other before. So I'm curious what that was like for you to film.
That was actually kind of a crazy day because, like, maybe 20 hours before, the SAG strike had been called. And my entire team was like
can you film the entire rest of the season tomorrow before LA wakes up and they call the strike? I was like, that's not up to me. But that scene and another scene between Harper and Robert, which was also kind of like a crash out fight scene, which didn't make it in the show, we decided to film those two big scenes, so we got those just in the event I couldn't finish my last like 6 days. So my dear friends pulled those scenes up on my behalf, which I was very grateful for, and so it was like emotionally charged anyway for me, because I kind of was like, is this the end? Am I gonna slap her and then leave? But it was, that scene to me was like the accumulation of all 3 seasons, this entire relationship in which there's been so much resentment and so much misexpressed love that can only end up in violence. You know, they say like, why does a character sing in a musical? It's because when words no longer suffice, they have to sing. So the emotions were running so high for both of us. We were so far at the end of our rope that the only thing left was to do violence.
Yeah.
And it was really, but it was also like how can we hurt the other person as much as humanly possible, because we are so hurt ourselves. And getting to do that with someone you actually love and respect, and with someone who you've built an incredible trust in our own lives, but also professionally, it's like an actor's candy to be like, I'm gonna really give it to someone today, and then I get to hit her. Wow.
And the amazing thing as well, I would say, is that like they mean how hurt they are.
Yeah.
They mean how angry they are. The intention with which they are saying everything they're saying, they mean wholeheartedly, but they don't really mean what they're saying,
Yeah.
which is such an exciting thing to be able to play as an actor. Like, you are playing your objective as hard as possible, which is like, I want to hurt you, but the reality of the words that you're using are like spilling out faster than you can think, because the intention is stronger than the thought. And then what you're left with is just this kind of like this overriding emotion that's literally spilling out of you so fast that you kind of have to hit, because there's nothing else to say.
Yeah.
And I think that what's amazing is that these two characters know each other so well now that they know exactly what those trigger points are, so they don't even need to think. These are two very smart women, Yasmin and Harper, in different ways, but they're not using their brains in this moment for one of the first times in the season. You know, they're like, it's guttural.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's why it was fun to watch, because they're playing in a different space to the space that they're usually playing in with each other.
And this was also like the y'all have seen the whole season, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just in case anyone will go back, I don't want to ruin anything. But all the stuff that happens on the boat, for Harper, her protecting and supporting Yasmin in the way that she does around the stuff with her father was the first time for me, and was my choice to play it this way, was the first time that Harper did something that was totally selfless. Completely not about her, all about protecting, saving, and showing love to her friend. It was a true act of selfless love. So I think the betrayal for both of them, right? The betrayal in the fallout of Yasmin losing her job was just so intense that there was no other option than to like spill your actual guts on the floor. But what's really exciting about sisterly love is that like you can actually do whatever to each other and you're still gonna like pick up the phone.
Well, I was saying before as well, like the great thing about that moment is, and it was originally that Yasmin slaps Harper, and then Harper says the line, calls her a whore, and then walks out. And I think that maybe would have been like uncomebackable, because like I've hit her, she said something horrible to me, and they're like on this uneven ground. Whereas the fact that they slap each other, it's like, well, they're both at zero, you know, so there is kind of a place to come back from in this. I mean, you know, Myha'la rang me when we first got the sides in, and she's like, is it just me, or if Yasmin slapped Harper, would Harper slap her back? Duh! I'm not gonna let you hit me and not hit you back. There was just no way in hell that I could let that happen. But we spoke with Mickey and Konrad about it, and there was a long conversation, and we said, well, we'll film both versions and see what really suits. But I think considering who both of these people are, that yes, they have to always stay on the same playing field. So I had to hit her back.
Myha'la, I'm glad you mentioned that scene, everything that goes down on the boat, and it being this act of selfless love. You can tell that that is probably one of the first times that Harper's chosen to behave that way. To then watch her, you know, betray Yasmin, betray Rishi, you know, in like very swift order. I'm just curious, how you make sense of the duality of that with Harper, and where you find her motivations in some of her decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that moment on the boat when she chooses pure love, like that to me feels the most instinctual, right? Like her calculatedness and her manipulation in business is all premeditated, it's all mathematical, and it's to some perfect end. This situation on the boat, we don't know what the end is. We only have now. And I think, there was no other way to play that, but this is honestly just love. Because it feels completely separate from who she is in business. And it's so funny that you say, like, she betrays her. When I have to justify her doing that in some way, because she really tries not to betray her. She tries, to the best of her abilities, to not throw Yasmin under the bus. It ends up happening anyway, and it can feel like it's all Harper's fault, but she's also a business person. This is what she does. She understands the rules of the business, and she believes Yasmin puts herself in a vulnerable position to be expendable, and that's her fault, not mine. And in fact, I stepped out to try to save you, which is also unlike her. So I think, she becomes sort of compartmentalized and pragmatic and realistic about that moment. But when we come into the kitchen and she says what's wrong? I love you. I meant to only help you. And she's saying, well, you did this and you got me fired. I think Harper's sort of at the end of her rope in that moment, because she actually is like, no, for the first time ever, I did something that had nothing to benefit me. And because they've had this relationship for so long where they're not actually saying their real feelings to each other, she doesn't know how to say, I'm really sorry, I tried to help you, but there's only so much I can do. Instead, she calls her a whore. Because that's what she knows how to do.
Going back to the last two episodes, Mickey and Konrad, you also directed them. You made your directorial debut with those episodes. Yeah.
Future. I think subconsciously as well, we were, whether we wanted to admit it to ourselves or not, we were almost certain, we maybe even didn't talk about it, but I don't think we thought we were going to get a fourth season. So we were like, the pickup from 2 to 3 was incredibly difficult. We were like, we might have 8 hours on HBO again in our careers. We have to direct at some point during this 8 hours, just practically for our careers. And it was, to be honest, it was me. I was really kind of against it. And the testament to our partnership was Mickey was like, of course we're doing this, and he sort of pushed me over the cliff. But we were also like, we had 2 hours, and we have all of these, we have to bring all these stories to a head. But we were also just like, we want to do our margin call episode, and we want to do our remains of the day episode. So like, how can we Trojan horse? Me and Mickey have always wanted to make a period drama. So like, how the hell do we do a period drama under the umbrella of industry? Well, it's kind of a bit like what was going on there. We actually shot in the Remains of the Day house, and then we're like, if we're going to do something that indulgent in 8, we have to do like a purely financial thriller episode in 7 to make it feel like a bit of a sort of palate cleanser. So yeah, it was kind of, I don't know, it was slightly experimental in a way. But what was freeing to us was like, oh wow, we can actually just Trojan horse almost anything under the rubric of the show. So I think season 4, with hopefully we get to do a lot more of it and maybe showcase a bit of that stuff.
I would love to hear from the cast about what it was like to have Mickey and Konrad directing you for those episodes.
It felt very streamlined for me. I like, they know it best, right? It's truly like reading pieces of their brain on the page, and anytime I ever had questions, I was always going to direct them, like, you know, and having an open dialogue. So having them there and not having to necessarily go through anyone else was just convenient. And I think also, like, we have been working together for as long as we have. We've got a very close personal relationship and now a very close working relationship, that there's like the language, right? They can say 2 words and I know exactly what they mean. So it felt, and because they know exactly what they want in the edit, it just felt super streamlined. And also just like as a friend, I was just very excited for them and very proud of them. And yeah, it was really special. It was great. It was though, it was great. And also like, this is their show. It's their taste, it's their brain, it's their everything. So like, of course, it's gonna make sense. I think we were all kind of like nervous a bit too, coming on to those first couple days, just because it was like, well, they see it all in the edit, but like this is what it looks like on set, and like, yes, so like, you know, like it takes this long and it feels this way, and like, but it was great, and I think it to have this kind of a collaborative relationship with all of us, the cast included, it was like, you know, we all got to work in different ways with each other this season. It was great.
And Fede as well, who shoots the show. Did he shoot all of season 2?
He shot 6 of the 8 episodes.
Yeah, okay. So Fede has been with us for ages.
He was so tired.
Oh, bless him. And he holds the camera on his shoulder the whole time. He doesn't put it down, there's no sticks. Like, he refuses to put that camera down. But like...
Except for the last shot. The last shot, he was like, I can't do it anymore. I was like, you've got 1 shot left, we're about to, it's going to be a wrap in the entire season. He was like, I can't do it.
His back was like this, it's fine. No, but because he had been on for so long, like, it was really easy. We already know what the show looks like, and they just told us what to do, and it was very simple.
Yeah, I think as well, like Mickey and Konrad have always overseen the show in a really granular way, to our benefit, you know. And ultimately, like we say in terms of from an actor's perspective, it's a great privilege to, like we said, to be part of long-running television. But also it becomes a practical strength. That was the real game changer for us. And ultimately, you spend 3 seasons trying to figure out like more seamless lines of communication between creatives, and this was just the most obvious solution to that. And I mean, it was because like, yeah, and it kind of declutters that and makes it all very transparent and very accessible. And that's what you want, and that speaks to the show at large as well. Like, fundamentally, on both sides of the camera, when we started this project, we didn't really know what we were doing, and we were young and naive and scared. But like, we know what this is now, and we know who we are and what we want to make. And I think Mickey and Konrad stepping on for the last 2 was kind of emblematic of that, really.
I think it's very poignant to have them direct us, because, you know, if the show were a child that we were taking care of, we're doing it with the parents watching, and there's something very kind of moving about and natural feeling that this makes sense that they would be watching and guiding us, taking care of this, you know, like Marisa said, their baby, basically.
Okay, my turn. No, I think by the time I got to work with them as directors, I think there must have been about 10 days into it. So any nerves that may or may not have existed, I think they've got out of their system. And the good thing about a season 3 to be directed by these 2 is that, you know, they've obviously created the characters. We've played them for a few years by now. Is they kind of just left us to it. I think my first scene was where Harper sort of screwed me over with Sweet Pea, great scene. And honestly, they were both just there, and they just kind of go, great, okay, we'll do 1 more for safety, and then just kind of let us. They were so chill about it, because again, they trusted us to do this for so long now, that they just let us get on with it, and that was really freeing.
agree with that as well, and just say that I think right from the very start, like I say, when we were like vastly inexperienced, I think
we like Trojan horse of things that we wanted to write about into the show. And you know, season 1, slice of life, London, people taking drugs, having sex, that kind of thing. Season 4 is we wanted to write a corporate thriller, and actually yesterday we met one of our heroes, Tony Gilroy, and I felt quite bad telling him that season 4 was a corporate thriller when he directed and wrote the greatest corporate thriller of all time. But we want to do something approaching Michael Clayton. And that's what we're trying to do. And whether it's successful, you have to tell us in not that long, actually, because we're trying to do it very quickly this time.
Looking forward to it. Thank you for being here, and thank you all for joining us.